As I have been saying for approximately 15 to 20 years, America is in a slow state of collapse and there is no way to stop it. And for many years when I said this, people were very confused and they said, Caleb, that doesn't make any sense, you're wrong. But in the last few years, now that Americans can actually look out their windows and see what is happening in terms of Western collapse and American collapse, now suddenly people have kind of woken up and sort of agree with me, even though they don't want to. In this video, I'm going to describe for you the realities of the American economy and the current state of the economy, the worsening state of the economy, and what that means for you as an American, and if you are not an American, because if you're not an American, what happens to the United States directly reflects upon the rest of at least the Western world and many parts of the non-Western world. So even if you're not an American, the collapse of America is something you should pay attention to. Now, as always, I do not really pay attention to politics anymore. Paying attention to politics is a complete waste of your time when there is no one you can vote for, no political party you can vote for who will save your American, Canadian, or European country. You're basically just fucked. You have to either move out of the country like I did or completely disconnect from the system, which is even more difficult in some respects than moving out of the country. But what I do pay attention to as a businessman, international businessman, and international investor is economic data. And so I'm going to give you several data points of what has been revealed over the last few months and certainly in the last month about America's horrible, ridiculous economy and how worse it's going to get. Now, before I get into the data points, I have to always do this and always cover the bases on this. I hate that I have to do this, but I know I have to because I know how YouTube and social media works. I'm about to criticize Joe Biden and left-wingers who support, even tacitly, Joe Biden. And what some of you are going to think is, oh, this guy is some right-winger, he's some anti-SJW red pill guy, he's some Trump supporter. No. Donald Trump was one of the worst presidents in my lifetime. He is one of the worst presidents we had in modern American history.
I don't know what I said.
Donald Trump's supporters are completely irrational and insane.
Please, President Trump.
As I've demonstrated many times in my past videos and blogs, I think Donald Trump fucking sucks. Donald Trump did, in his 4 years as president, 2 things right. He cut my taxes and he handled North Korea well. And he did literally everything else wrong. The other 12,000 things he did completely wrong, and he made everything worse. And on top of that, if you are a Trump supporter, I've already talked about how Trump did literally nothing you wanted him to do. And if you don't believe me, you can click this video right here where I go into all the details of Trump's failed presidency and how stupid Trump supporters ended up looking. So no, I am not a Trump supporter. Trump fucking sucks, and the vast majority of Trump supporters are totally irrational. Now let's talk about Joe Biden and his supporters and what he has done to the country. As a matter of fact, and I've talked about this many times before, when Biden started talking about multi-trillion-dollar spending bills, all the Trump supporters said, oh my God, this is terrible. But when Donald Trump was president, he went through on a $1.8 trillion spending bill, and not one Trump supporter said shit. Donald Trump supporters are for big, massive, corrupt government. Biden supporters are for big, massive, corrupt government. That's the way Americans are, and that's the way most Western countries are today. Voters are completely and totally irrational and have lost their ability to solve basic problems. That is one of the many reasons why the entire Western world is in a state of collapse, and it can't be fixed. Okay, now let's talk about Joe Biden and his supporters. A few data points, most of them from the last month, that would be August of 2021. The jobs report came out for the United States, and it was 1/3 of what they planned. I believe the number was around 700,000 and the real number was around 200,000. 1/3 of the jobs they wanted. That's really bad, and it's gonna get worse. On top of that, as usual, the Fed's response to this horrible jobs report is to keep buying assets, which means keep printing up more money, printing up trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars, because that's what left-wingers and most Donald Trump supporters either support or don't mind. And that will undermine America's economy, that will undermine America's currency. That is a very big topic. I've discussed this in my blogs before. I'm not gonna go into great detail about this. On top of that, not only were less jobs gained than they expected, 1/3, a lot of jobs were lost. 30,000 jobs in the United States in the month of August were lost in the retail sector, and another 40,000 were lost in the restaurant sector. Another 40,000 on top of the kabillions, I don't know the total number,
700 billion and $1.3 trillion
that have been lost since the beginning of cerveza sickness over a year ago. I'm shocked. 40,000 more restaurant people lost their jobs after all these people lost their jobs in the restaurant sector because of cerveza sickness? Or should I say the government's overreaction to the cerveza sickness? Really bad, and it's going to get much worse. And the only thing the government will do, the only thing governments know how to do, Western governments plus the Japanese government, the only thing they know how to do is print more money. And here's what happens when you print a bunch of money. Here are the inflation numbers that are the most recent. The CPI, which is the most widely accepted inflation figure, which is BS, I've talked about many times in my blogs. It's actually artificially low. But even this artificially low number is 5.3% for the month of August. Normally that number is around 2 or 3%. It is now up to 5.3%. And as I've said many times, the CPI is bullshit. The CPI doesn't include things like transportation costs. Has the price of oil gone up or down? Or things like the cost of healthcare. Has the price of healthcare gone up or down? Or the cost of things like college. Has the price of college gone up or down? Inflation is many, many multiples of what the CPI is, and even the CPI, which is a watered down number, which the government uses to say, see, look, inflation's not that bad, is now almost double what it usually is. On top of that, you have the PPI, which is the Producer's Price Index. That's the price of manufacturing goods and services and things like that at the producer level. That is up 7% for the year since the beginning of the year. 7% for the year. If you annualize that, you factor in the next few months, that is equivalent to 12% inflation producer growth for the year. This is really, really bad. And if you don't have a thorough understanding of economics and inflation, you're free to do your own research. But this is really, matter of fact, I'll be honest, these inflation numbers look worse sooner than I thought they'd look. I didn't think they would look this bad this soon. So in some respects, the collapse of the United States is happening faster than even I thought it was going to happen. Kind of insane. You have multiple leading indicators for not just inflation, but stagflation. Stagflation, if you don't know what that means you experience high inflation combined with high employment because of reduced demand from the economy. The United States has not experienced stagflation since I was a little tiny boy in the 1970s. The 1970s. That's how bad it's getting. The odds are pretty good that in the next few years in the United States, we will experience stagflation. For those of you who didn't live through the 1970s, the 1970s fucking sucked. It is probably the worst decade of my life in terms of the decades I've been alive. I was born in 1972. The 1970s economically was a very dark time. You don't want to go through that again. And if you're an American living in the United States and or possibly a Westerner that has an economy reliant on the United States, you're going to experience this too. Now, if you want some detailed information on how to protect yourself from inflation, you can watch this video right here. I go through several techniques you can use to beat inflation, to profit from inflation, things that I'm using. Some of them are a little complicated, but check out that video if you want. That'll help you. Now, I could go on and on with all these horrible economic indicators. I'm going to give you the bottom line of what's going to happen in the United States over the next few years, sooner rather than later. 4 things. Number 1, inflation is going to increase. Prices are going to be more expensive. The costs of you maintaining your life, buying food, housing, paying your utility bills, buying things, the prices of these things are going to go up. And they're going to go up in ways in which you will actually notice and it'll actually bother you. Now, the slight good news to this is if you're an intelligent investor, the prices of other assets will increase that may actually help you, like the price of precious metals, the price of real estate, in some cases the price of cryptocurrency. So that's ways in which you can benefit from rising inflation costs if you're careful and you're a careful investor. But other than that, everything's going to start costing a lot more damn money, which means in a roundabout way your income is going down. If you make $30,000 a year, but suddenly stuff is 10% more expensive, you basically take a 10% income hit. Your income is now 10% lower. That's what inflation does. It sucks. And if it's stagflation, it's going to be even worse. Number 2, the next thing that is likely to occur as part of stagflation is that consumer demand and or business demand is likely going to decrease. This is not good for business. This is not good for the economy in the United States. This is all bad news. That's why you need to follow my business advice of niching. You need to niche. You need to narrowly niche. The more you're niched, the more you are protected against reduced demand. People who are generalists, who sell to everybody, those are the people who get slaughtered when demand drops. And most people, both with jobs and businesses, are in that category. They either have a business that is a generalist business or they work for a company that is a generalist company. They're all going to be in big trouble. By the way, before I continue the next few things, if you like this content, you should subscribe to this channel. You should click the dumb notification bell. You should like this video and leave a comment on this video, and the comment can be whatever you want. The more interactivity I get on this content, the more of this content I will produce for you, so you're only helping yourself by doing these things. The next one, and this is a big one, and this is something that people are unprepared for and that people aren't really talking about. And it's kind of strange they're not talking about it. And this is even a bigger deal in some respects than inflation. And that is crime will increase in the United States and all around the Western world. I have been on record as saying many times in the past that since I was born in the 1970s, everything about the United States has grown worse every decade with the exception of two things. Technological growth, which has been wonderful, and that's been good, that's gotten better, and crime rates. I have said historically crime rates have gone down since the 1970s, and they have. Crime rates have gone down throughout my entire lifetime until now. Just in the last few years, for the first time since I was a little kid, and I'm 50 years old, this is a long time ago, crime rates are now on the rise all over the United States. For the first time in my lifetime. And they're going to get worse. Overall, crime rates are rising at a rate of about 3% per year. 3% per year. That's not good. You add a few years, that ends up being a lot of crime. And if you dig into the numbers as I have, you're going to see some horrifying shit. For example, the murder rate has gone up. So in 2020, the murder rate went, I'm not even going to tell you, I'm not going to tell you this. I want you to guess how much the murder rate went up in the United States in 2020. Okay? You think it went up 2%, 3%, 5%? You think the murder rate went up 5% in 2020 in 1 year? 7%? God forbid. 10%? The murder rate? No. 25%. If you don't believe me, go look it up. The murder rate in the United States went up by 25% in 2020 alone. And this is going to get worse. So the one thing that America can say was getting better with America, they can't even brag about that anymore. Reducing crime rates, now they're going back up. The last thing you've got is increasing technology, and that's not really political. Yeah, so in direct relation to rising crime rates, you have number 4 on this list, and that is, and I've talked about this before in past YouTube videos, I demonstrated this very clearly last year, is that civil unrest will increase all over the United States, and this is something that will increase all over the Western world. Civil unrest will increase in Canada, civil unrest will increase all over Europe, particularly Western Europe, but some parts of Eastern Europe as well. Civil unrest. Large groups of people causing large amounts of damage in cities. As I have said before, if you choose to stay for the rest of your life in the United States, good luck. You are going to have to get used to regular civil unrest in the cities. Regular civil unrest. It will be a normal thing for crazy mobs of idiots, either left-wingers or Trump supporters, because they've both done it, breaking windows, smashing buildings, invading buildings, attacking the cops, getting into altercations with the cops. This is going to be a regular condition as the United States continues to collapse. You need to just get used to this, or at least move out of the cities and go to the rural areas, or do what I did, move out of the country. We don't have civil unrest in where I live, in the United Arab Emirates, in Dubai. We don't have civil unrest there. They don't really have civil unrest in Paraguay. These are unusual things in the places where I spend time. But if you want to spend the rest of your life in the United States or the Western world, you're going to have to get used to regular civil unrest. Now, as I've said before, I do not anticipate a civil war. The typical American is too fat, too beta, too lazy, too drug addicted, and too terrified to actually pick up a gun and shoot other Americans. You will not see a civil war. That will not happen. But what you will see, and you're seeing it now, is an increased constant level that constantly gets worse of civil unrest in most American cities and Canadian cities and European cities, pretty much until the United States finally goes under. If you are smart and you want to move out of the collapsing United States, you can get my course on how to move out of the country. It's at escapeplancourse.com. And I highly recommend you do that. If for some reason you are stubborn, and most of you are, you're saying, well, it's not that bad yet, and you want to stay in the United States, okay, fine. If you want to stay in the United States, there are 6 things you must do in order to protect yourself from the collapse that is now happening around you right before your very eyes to your country, the United States, and Canada and Western Europe. And if you want to know what those 6 things are, you should watch this video right here. I strongly suggest you do one of the two. Watch that video or get out of the country, because shit's getting a lot worse under Joe Biden and or the Democrats. And even if Republicans somehow are able to bring Trump back, he won't make it any better because he didn't, as I demonstrated already. Think this shit through. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.